Hello everybody, welcome back to Chef Plays, and today we are reviewing Lies of P. I was going to get this one out earlier, but I did want to give it some decent playtime before I did that, and man, I just want to say before we get into it, that this game definitely lived up to the hype I was hoping. My own personal hype, that is. I've been watching and tracking this game and waiting for it since the first trailer dropped, and oh man, does it really deliver. So we're gonna kind of do this like the zombie reviews, where we go over a ton of things I enjoy. There's really not too much I don't enjoy, um, but yeah, well let's just do it. First off, I pretty much already said it, but this is such a solid game. If you're into the Soulsborne formula, this is definitely a really cool take on it. And I know a lot of people say Soulsborne or Souls-like. I would definitely go with Soulsborne with this one, just because it definitely feels like it pulls a lot of inspiration from Bloodborne, and it does it well, but also changes enough to be its own thing. The combat feels really good. I've seen a mixture of people saying it feels stiff, or some people saying it feels fluid. I think it feels awesome. It does take some getting used to because it is a little different. Like that guy getting a cheap shot just because I didn't time right. That's nothing with the game. That was me goofing. And as I was just getting into, is timing is super important in this game. Like knowing when to dodge, knowing when to hit, knowing what to watch out for, and it plays a really big part, just like any other Souls game. The setting of the game itself is amazing. Krat is really its own world. Um, as you're going through it and starting to explore more areas, it kind of puts the setting and the story together, like all in one bundle. I think it does that really well. And you start to see the effects that this has had on everybody. And what this really is puppets that took over. They were supposed to be for helping and entertainment, and just ended up taking over and, killing everyone. So it's Pinocchio's job to go in and fix that. It feels very paced and fluid. I haven't had any real issues with getting lost. I did once, but we'll touch on that later, because it's got an important part with it. Uh, but it's pretty clear on where you need to go and what you need to do. Um, and it's never too hard to figure it out, even if you do kind of lose yourself for a couple minutes. The enemies are cool. Like, the puppets are awesome, and I have just ran into, as of recording this, a new type of enemy that I haven't seen yet, and think cross between like a Left 4 Dead zombie and like a stalker from The Last of Us. They're quick, they're smart, and they hit heavy. They hit pretty heavy for a standard enemy. And I feel like it's gonna be like the basic enemy of the area I'm in. And that comes with the next point, is to learn your opponents. A really important thing with this game is to learn how your opponents work and function, how they attack, how they move, how they dodge, and what their patterns are, because learning that, like, the quicker the better. Even if you have to die one or two times and go back to stargazers, which are like your bonfires, you need to learn your opponents. I've had some pretty decent luck with bosses, but a lot of the basic enemies give me more of a run for my money than the bosses, and I don't really think that's a problem. I think it's just, after beating so many Souls games, I think that the bosses are a little easier to predict than standard enemies. Because standard enemies could be anywhere from slow to super fast, and granted bosses can too, but I don't know, I personally can read them a little easier. There are some cool weapon mechanics in this game. Not quite like Bloodborne, but like you can detach handles and put them on other weapons, and vice versa. Like the heads of weapons and put it on a different handle, and just so it'll give it different stats, you'll use it differently, and it's just a nice tool that you unlock fairly early on for how overpowered it can be. I've only played with it a little bit because the electric coil stick is my go-to weapon. It works like a tank. It's the only one I've really upgraded, and it's definitely one I recommend. The different vendors, which I'm kind of going from place to place here now, they all have a different purpose. Some sell you minor things, others sell you key items, some upgrade your weapons, she levels you up directly, and that station I was just at lets you build other arms. You have a powered left arm, which, depending on which one you're using, will have different effects. There's a hook shot, there's a shield, there's a flamethrower, there's like a spark gun, and they all have their benefits and lack thereof, depending on the enemies you're going against. I personally stick with the hook shot just because it's, for smaller enemies, it's really easy to separate one from a crowd to make things easier. And that is what that yellow bar is. And you can either go to a stargazer or use a little magazine thing to recharge it. And now it's super similar to Bloodborne. Like, setting feels this very similar, enemies feel very similar, weapons kind of feel similar, just the aesthetic overall, and that's not a bad thing. Bloodborne was the first Souls-like game that I beat, like start to finish, and I loved it, and I've replayed that game a dozen times, so to have a new experience in what feels like a similar world was really, really nice. Now for the bosses, I've faced a decent amount of them at this point, being a Soulsborne, and they do not disappoint. The bosses in this game not only fit the story, but they are incredible. Like, they're huge, they're just ready to go, and they're not all main bosses. I've seen, and this ties with my next point, being side areas and hidden bosses, is I've seen people who review this say that there's none, but so far I have found two. I found a survivor who took a decent amount. There are human bosses. There's the Mad Donkey, the Survivor, and the Railroad Blocker, which I've only ones I've come across so far, and they're super easy to take down. Like, all you really have to do is wait for them to use... They all seem to have like a main like thrust attack. Wait for them to do that, go behind them, use your execution, rinse and repeat, and you can take out human enemies in like 2.5 minutes, like the bosses. But there are side optional bosses. Like the Survivor was one. There's the Puppet of the Future, which is huge. Kind of looks like Pac-Man from Tekken versus Street Fighter. And it's solid. And then lastly, the mention of and return of actual Pinocchio characters. Because obviously you have Pinocchio being the main character. And then you have Jiminy Cricket, who talks to you as you play. Sophie the Fairy is like a full-on person now, and she's where you go to level up. And of course Geppetto, who you rescue early on, and what he does is kind of helps you give you core upgrades, like things that make enemies stagger longer, more health regen items, and he does a lot. Like, he very much makes it clear that, like, he knows he messed up in making these puppets, and that he doesn't want to send Pinocchio out to fix it, but he knows he can trust him with it. And it's a really nice detail. But yeah, all things said, I think this game is a 9.5 for me. This game is super solid. I'm making my way through it decently. I've only gotten frustrated like once so far, which is pretty decent for a Souls game. And as far as I am, I think I'm a level 54 out of like 600. But it's super fun, and I totally recommend it. And if you have Game Pass, it is on there for free, which is really nice. I know that on Xbox, I'm not sure about PC Game Pass. That's a maybe. But it is such a good game, and I cannot recommend it enough. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Hope you're having a good day. If you're watching early on, have a good rest of your day. See you in the next one, and until then, see you.